The Gnostic Film and Television Podcast. Hello, welcome to the Gnostic Film and Television Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Chambers. Today's guests are Sol and Alan from the podcast Diminishing Returns. We're going to be discussing an obscure film from the 90s called The Rapture, starring Mimi Rodgers. Hope you enjoy the show. Thanks for joining me today. The reason I've invited you both on today is because I don't just want to have people on who are into Gnosticism or spirituality. I want people who are actually quite knowledgeable with film and cinema. So would you mind telling my listeners, if I've got any, what Diminishing Returns is about?
Yeah, it's basically a film review podcast. Sol and I, and usually a third guest that we have, rotating guests, including a Mr. Scott Chambers, has been on a few times. And we essentially look at a film or a film franchise, review it, take the piss a bit, and then sort of discuss how we would have made it better.
Yeah, the premise.
If we had any power.
Yeah, the elevator pitch, to use a term, is that we review a film, then pitch our ideas for the sequel. But 200 plus episodes in, we've got pretty lax about bothering to actually pitch sequels. So it's become more of a fun chat. Yeah. But sometimes we pitch sequels.
But it's descended into mostly us doing stupid comedy improv characters. But we do talk a lot about films. We are a kind of combination of quite genuine, sincere film criticism and light-hearted whimsy. So hopefully a good mix for a podcast. So certainly everyone I know loves it.
Well, they would say that to you, though, wouldn't they?
Well, Alan's mum loves it, and believe me, she would not say that if it weren't true. She would be the first person to slag it off and tell Alan that he's wasted his life and what have you.
We just did an episode on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and both our mums got in touch with us to say they really liked it. Weirdly enough. It's
very odd.
I don't know why.
Yeah. I can't wait to hear what our mums think of our next episode with Jeff Davis, the creator of Teen Wolf.
The creator of MTV's Teen Wolf, Jeff Davis.
Yeah. Not Jeff B. Davis, the comedian from Harmontown, and whose line is it anyway?
Nope.
So with Diminishing Returns, do you pitch sequels to films that already have sequels?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, It's pretty loose, to be honest with you. We'll. Yeah. It's the same as Hollywood. We'll mine anything we can. We don't care.
Yeah, for example, if we do Terminator on the show, we'll do all the Terminator films. I think when we did Terminator, it was split across 2 episodes because there were too many for one. But then, did we pitch sequels to, if they were to make another Terminator now? I think that's kind of how we'd approach it. Although, we might just go wipe the slate clean and just make Terminator 2, again, like they did with
Imagine
Halloween.
You're in 1985.
It's a great premise, actually, because it's almost like an insight into an alternative history.
Yeah, it's nice to imagine, what cast would you put in it in this particular time and all that sort of.
I mean, that's quite popular these days, isn't it, to have sequels to films that reboot the continuity or just disregard the previous sequels. Halloween being the most recent example.
Yeah, it's an increasingly common thing. I think it used to be quite common in Japan, weirdly enough. They certainly did it with Godzilla a number of times back over the years. I think they did it with Godzilla in the 80s and then again at 2005 or something like that. But anyway, they've started doing it a lot recently. I think it's because Halloween went down so well. But there's definitely a few more of those in the works. I think they're doing RoboCop.
Yeah, Alien.
RoboCop Returns. Yeah, RoboCop Returns as if RoboCop 2 and 3 never happened, and there was an Alien sequel in the works as if the other Alien 3, 4 onwards never happened. Although I think that's now stalled.
Scrapped. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
aliens in
Ridley
space.
Scott, Ridley Scott threw his toys out of his pram.
While we're on the subject of Alien, I read something that made me properly cringe about the new film. Apparently, they're making Alien 5, and they said that they couldn't discuss too much at the moment about what the film was going to be about, but they did say that the tagline was going to be this: in space, no one can hear you dream. Ooh.
When I hear that tagline, it just makes me think of David the android doing some weird, like, Lawnmower Man style exploration into the very nature of what it is to be human. That doesn't evoke anything like what I think they're trying to evoke from me.
Yeah, I heard that, and I thought they're already off to a bad start. So when I messaged Saul to ask if he wanted to be on the podcast, I said that he didn't have to pick a film with just Gnostic themes. It could also be films with religious or spirituality themes in the film. And he suggested the Rapture, which is right up my street, actually. You know, with people going through strange mystical experiences or psychosis, depends on your perspective. But it's quite ambiguous. I think it's ambiguous anyway, with the ending at least. But I'll clue you into why I started a podcast about Gnosticism. Well, Gnostic films anyway, Gnostic films and TV, because I had my own gnosis, which is Greek for knowledge. Which, disclaimer: I was very, very high on drugs, LSD. So you can take that any way that you want. Water is more comforting for you and whoever's listening. If you do think I just had a psychotic breakdown, then yeah, I know I was high on LSD, but I did see this strange mystical language, and I realized I was perceiving it and not imagining it. The trip was actually full of clarity, and it wasn't like I was in a delirium, but anyway, the language I saw was like these ancient symbols, like this like text, and through synchronicity I saw a video about Gnosticism, and they were showing these ancient texts from the Nag Hammadi library, and I recognized the language. Now you could make the argument that, and it's a valid argument, that during the trip my subconscious just brought it up, but you know, that's just as weird to me as if it was a metaphysical message from the divine. And ever since then I've had an obsession with Gnosticism, and I realized that a lot of films and TV shows have Gnostic themes, and I thought it was a good way to keep myself grounded to explore the subject would be to set up a podcast which looked at these films and TV. It'll stop me from drinking the Kool-Aid or turning my flat into fucking Waco. So so that's why I decided to set up this podcast.
It's interesting, isn't it, that thing of how we as a species, I suppose, seem to have a set of subconscious things in our head that come out weirdly. Like, you know, when you look at the amount of people who have sleep paralysis, and have you ever had that jester one? I was reading the other day about how there's this jester figure that loads of people report seeing, and then they'll look it up and be like, oh my god, that's the guy who was in my dream, but there's no real reason why they would have thought of it or been aware of it prior to that. I had a similar thing once where I had sleep paralysis, but very mild insofar as I kind of view it was sleep paralysis and therefore wasn't freaking out. And I perceived this kind of classic black suited figure, you know, pale figure in the corner of the room.
Will Smith.
Like
Slender Man.
Like
black suits coming.
Yeah. Like a Slender Man type. They were in a kind of Undertaker outfit. They had a kind of top hat on. But I remember finding it really weird, this specific detail. They were barefoot, and they had really like creepy, unpleasant, unkept feet. And I went online the next day, like, you know, oh god, am I going to find that this is a really common thing about the bare feet in some culture somewhere? And it wasn't. So that's the last
He's got a weird thing about feet.
I just made up some weird thing in my subconscious, but it is weird how much people do seem to have those kinds of experiences.
You should check out The Nightmare. It's a documentary on sleep paralysis. It's directed by the guy who did the Room 237 documentary, because it's very creepy. Because I used to suffer with sleep paralysis, but to be honest, I only used to get it when I was coming down from MDMA. And I think it's got something to do with the depletion of serotonin. I was more prone to it back then, but I know I've not had it in years. But it can feel realer than real, and I can understand why people think that they've been abducted by aliens.
Completely, absolutely. The first time I had sleep paralysis that I remember, the second it happened, it was like, oh, so that's why people think they've been haunted by a ghost, is it? Like,
Yeah.
I woke up and I thought, oh, wow, that must be that sleep paralysis thing I've read about. And then I thought, I'm so glad that I have an interest in the paranormal and things like that. And so I've actually read about this sort of stuff, because if I wasn't predisposed to think of sleep paralysis, I'd be terrified, because that was the experience of a ghost coming into my room
definitely.
and sitting on my chest. And it was,
It's
very
horrible.
real, but that's what it is. And on the flip side of that, I get furious now whenever I see paranormal investigators or spirit mediums or people who claim to be able to, engage with the dead and what have you. And you see it so often where they'll take call-ins or talk to people, and then the people will blatantly describe sleep paralysis as in, oh, I was in bed and this ghost came and sat on me and I didn't quite wake up because when you're that tired, you don't really wake up, do you? And it's like, no, think about it. If you were asleep and someone sat on you, you would wake up if you weren't expecting it. The fact that you were groggy and didn't come round is because you were in sleep.
Because it was a ghost.
Paralysis.
But yeah, Carl Jung had the theory of the collective unconscious, where there is certain archetypes that we all share. So when people do have these strange night terrors, the shadow people are something that seems to be universally shared. Anyway, talking of strange experiences, The Rapture is a very strange film, not just because of the subject matter, but it's got this like weird dreamlike feel to it.
It's a really weird film. I mean, I picked this to do pretty much because I watched this about 10 years ago, and I kind of intended to watch it again ever since. And I just thought, you know what, that's a film I've been meaning to watch again for a million years. I should finally get round to it and really try and not just watch it again, but have a conversation about it and what it all means at the end. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I went into this film, and I think I watched it in 2012, I think I was living with you, Alan, back in London at the time, and I just found the idea of the rapture as a concept quite interesting, and I thought, oh, there might be some good films out there. I want to see some films about that. So I watched this movie knowing it was about the rapture, but I didn't know anything else beyond that. And so I hated it for the first hour or so because I didn't know what level it was being pitched at. And obviously, having seen the film, you'll know that it kind of goes crazy in the final 10, 15 minutes and recontextualizes everything. And that made me want to revisit it for 10 years. And I finally got into it now. So,
just to give a brief kind of idea of what the film is. So there's a woman who becomes a born-again Christian. Yeah, Mimi Rodgers. She becomes a born-again Christian, and then that has consequences. When her husband
starts off
dies,
with her, before she becomes a born-again Christian, she is like, it's like watching a Christian propaganda film. It's that level of...
She lives a life
She
sin.
smokes the reefer. She goes out and has debaucherous swinger parties where she like cuckolds her boyfriend or something, whatever it is. He likes to watch her have sex with other men and women whilst they smoke the reefer and do the cocaine and drink the whiskey or whatever. Yeah, but they're living a life of sin. That's the point, and it is presented. If
that's the problem. That's the problem I was having throughout this film was I can't tell the difference between Christian kind of propaganda and satire of Christian propaganda because they work on the same level. They're exactly the same because you could watch this as a hardcore Christian and go, yeah, that's true. That is very good. Yeah.